The afternoon sun hung low over the small town, painting the streets with a golden glow. The air carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, mixed with the faint scent of gasoline from the nearby gas station. People walked in and out of the convenience store, carrying their groceries, chatting about their day, and minding their own business. Among them stood Malik, an 11-year-old boy with big, curious eyes and skin the shade of warm brown. His backpack, too large for his small frame, dangled from his shoulders. The straps were frayed and the zipper stuck halfway open, but Malik carried it proudly. Inside it were a few comic books, a half-empty juice box, and a folded letter written in neat handwriting, the kind only one man in his life wrote, his father. Malik shifted from one foot to another, staring at the corner of the street. He was waiting. His heart was racing, not from fear but from excitement. His father, Sergeant Daniels, was coming home today. After months away on a mission, today was the day Malik had dreamed about. He could already imagine the strong arms, lifting him into the air, the deep voice saying, "Missed you, champ." But to the people passing by, Malik just looked like a boy loitering. A patrol car rolled slowly past the convenience store and stopped. The driver's door opened, and a tall police officer stepped out. Officer Bradley adjusted his belt and approached, Malik with a frown. His shadow fell across the boy, and Malik looked up nervously. "Hey, kid," the officer said in a firm voice. "What are you doing out here alone?" Malik swallowed and tried to smile. "I'm waiting for my dad, sir." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Your dad, huh? Where is he? Why isn't he here with you?" "He's coming," Malik said quickly, his eyes brightening. "He's a soldier, Special Forces. He's coming home today." The officer paused, then chuckled softly, shaking his head. His laugh wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was the kind of laugh grown-ups use when they think kids are making up stories. "Special Forces?" he repeated. "Sure, kid, and I'm Superman." Malik's cheeks burned. His small hands gripped the straps of his backpack tighter. He looked down at his shoes, then back up, forcing himself to speak. "It's true. He wrote me a letter. He promised he'd be here." Officer Bradley sighed and crossed his arms. "Listen, kid, I've heard plenty of tall tales before. Every boy wants to believe his dad is some kind of hero. But Special Forces? That's a bit much, don't you think?" A couple of passers-by slowed their steps, glancing over at the scene. A woman carrying groceries gave a small smile, whispering to her friend. "Isn't that sweet? The boy thinks his dad's a superhero." Malik's ears caught the words, and his throat tightened. He wasn't making it up. His dad really was coming. His dad had served for years, and Malik knew it better than anyone. The letters, the medals in the glass case at home, the stories his mom used to tell him, all proof. But here he was, standing on the street being treated like a liar. Still he refused to back down. "My dad is Special Forces," Malik said, his voice firmer this time. "He's the bravest man I know. He fights for our country. And today he's coming home to me." The officer tilted his head, still unconvinced. "All right, champ, if you say so." His tone carried more amusement than belief. The laughter stung, but Malik kept his chin high. Deep inside, he knew the truth, and soon everyone else would see it too. The minutes passed slowly. Cars drove by, horns honked, and people moved in and out of the store. Malik stood his ground, his eyes never leaving the street corner. In his heart, he pictured his father's smile, his strong shoulders, and the way his voice made him feel safe. Officer Bradley leaned against his patrol car, arms folded. He shook his head again, half smiling, as if waiting to prove the boy wrong. But Malik didn't notice the doubt anymore. He wasn't thinking about the laughter or the whispers. He was thinking about the sound of boots on the pavement, about the moment his father would step into view. He was thinking about the promise his father had written in that letter. "I'll be there, son. Don't let go of hope." So Malik didn't let go. The sun dipped a little lower and shadows stretched longer across the street. The world around him kept moving, but Malik stood still, waiting. And though the officer laughed and the crowd whispered, Malik's heart told him something no one else could hear. His father was on his way. The late afternoon breeze picked up, carrying the faint rustle of leaves down the street. Malik still stood outside the store, eyes fixed on the corner, waiting for the moment his father would appear. His heart thudded with hope, but the wait was beginning to stretch longer than he had imagined. Officer Bradley leaned against his patrol car, glancing at his watch. He had seen kids waiting before, sometimes for parents who never showed, sometimes for ones who were just running late. To him, Malik looked no different. But the boy's words about his father being in the Special Forces still echoed in his ears, and Bradley couldn't help but shake his head. "Kid," the officer finally said, breaking the silence, "you've been standing here for almost half an hour. You sure your dad's coming?" Malik turned his gaze up at him, his expression serious. "Yes, sir. He promised me. My dad never breaks a promise." The firmness in Malik's voice surprised Bradley, but he didn't soften his tone. Instead, he gave a small laugh, the kind that came more from doubt than humor. "Listen, I don't want to crush your imagination, but Special Forces, that's not something people just are. You don't see them walking around small towns like this every day." Malik's small fists tightened around his backpack straps. He hated the way the officer said it, as if his dad were just a fairy tale. "But he is," Malik insisted. "He wrote me letters, he told me stories, he even sent me his patch once." The boy's eyes sparkled at the memory, but Bradley only shook his head. "Kid, parents tell stories all the time. Sometimes they exaggerate to make things sound exciting. Doesn't mean it's all real." Malik felt a sting in his chest. It wasn't exaggeration. It wasn't a lie. His dad was real, his missions were real, and his service was real. But here he was, trying to explain it to a grown man who looked at him like he was making things up. A couple of teenagers walked past, overhearing just enough of the conversation to smirk. "Special Forces, huh?" one of them teased lightly. "What's next? He's in outer space?" They laughed and kept walking. Malik's face turned hot with embarrassment. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were wrong, but the words stuck in his throat. He just looked back at the officer, desperate for someone, anyone, to believe him. Bradley sighed, noticing the boy's frustration. "Look, Malik, I'm not saying your dad isn't a good man. I'm sure he's great, but Special Forces is serious business. If he really was, you'd see people saluting him on the street, reporters wanting to talk to him. Guys like that don't just show up at corner stores." Malik lifted his chin, eyes fierce. "My dad doesn't want reporters. He doesn't need people to salute him. He just wants to come home to me. That's all." The officer paused. There was something in the boy's voice, an unshakable certainty, but doubt still lingered in Bradley's mind. Over the years, he had met plenty of kids who believed things that weren't true, kids who built stories around absent fathers. He didn't want this boy to be disappointed when reality hit, so he softened his voice, trying to sound gentle. "Sometimes, dads. Sometimes they say things they don't mean, kid. They want you to feel proud, so they make up stories. You should prepare yourself just in case." Malik's eyes watered, but not from sadness, from frustration. "You don't know, my dad," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You don't know him like I do. He is coming. You'll see." Bradley rubbed the back of his neck, uneasy. He wasn't trying to be cruel, but the boy's faith was so strong that it almost made him doubt his own doubt. Still, he stayed silent, crossing his arms and watching. The minutes stretched on. The shadows grew longer. Malik shifted on his feet, remembering the letters again. He remembered one in particular, the one that said, "When you feel like nobody believes in you, remember that I always do, even from far away." That memory steadied him. His father had never failed him, and he wasn't about to start now. Nearby, an older woman came out of the store with her groceries and noticed the boy. She smiled kindly. "Waiting for your dad, sweetheart?" "Yes, ma'am," Malik said softly. "And when's he coming?" she asked. "Any minute now," Malik replied, his voice regaining strength. "He's a soldier, special forces. He's coming home today." The woman blinked, surprised, then gave a small nod. "That must make you very proud." She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt. She just smiled and walked away. For a moment, Malik felt relief. Finally, someone who didn't treat him like a joke. But Officer Bradley was still there, shaking his head as if he'd heard enough. "All right, kid. I'll wait with you a little longer, but don't be upset if your dad doesn't show up the way you think." Malik didn't answer. He just kept his eyes locked on the street, his heart steady. He knew the officer didn't believe him. The strangers passing by didn't believe him. But soon, they all would. Because when his father came into view, the truth would no longer be something to explain. It would be something everyone could see with their own eyes. Malik's faith never wavered. Even in the face of doubt, even in the face of laughter, he knew the man he was waiting for. He knew his father, and nothing anyone said could take that away from him. The evening sun dipped lower, turning the sky into shades of orange and pink. The street outside the convenience store grew quieter. Cars still passed, but fewer people were going in and out now. The day was slowly giving way to night. Malik still stood on the sidewalk, his small figure looking even smaller as the shadows stretched long. His eyes stayed fixed on the corner of the street, waiting for the familiar face he longed to see. Officer Bradley was still nearby, leaning against his patrol car. He tapped his fingers on his belt, his patience thinning. He didn't say much now. Maybe he had already said enough. He had laughed, he had doubted, and now he just stood there, watching a boy cling to hope. Malik felt the silence pressing on him. At first, he didn't mind. He was used to waiting for letters, waiting for phone calls, waiting for the day his father would finally come home. But here, surrounded by strangers who didn't believe him, the waiting felt heavier. He could hear the whispers in his mind, echoes of the laughter from earlier. The teenagers who had mocked him, the officer's chuckle, even the quiet smiles of passing strangers who thought his words were just a child's fantasy. For the first time that day, Malik's heart sank a little. What if they're right? The thought slipped into his mind like a shadow. What if Dad doesn't come? What if something happened? He shook his head quickly, forcing the thought away. His father had promised, and if there was one thing Malik believed in, it was his father's promises. But still, doubt has a way of sneaking in, especially when you feel alone. Malik sat down on the curb, resting his backpack beside him. He pulled out the folded letter and opened it carefully. The paper was creased and a little worn from being read so many times. His father's handwriting filled the page in neat lines. "Dear Malik, I know it's hard when I'm away, but remember, you're strong. Stronger than you know. I'll be back soon, and when I come home, we'll go get ice cream just like we used to. Don't lose hope. I'll be there, son." Malik traced the words with his finger, whispering them under his breath. The letter felt like a warm hand on his shoulder, even though his father was still out of sight. Officer Bradley glanced over and sighed. "Still reading that letter, huh?" Malik didn't look up. "Yes, because it's true." Bradley opened his mouth as if to argue, then stopped. Something about the boy's quiet determination made it harder to keep teasing him. So instead, the officer just looked away, pretending to focus on his radio. The evening grew cooler. A chill crept into the air, and Malik pulled his backpack closer, hugging it like a pillow. He thought about all the nights when he sat by the window at home, waiting for the mail, praying for a letter. He thought about the times kids at school asked where his dad was and how he always answered proudly, even when they didn't believe him. And now, here he was again, waiting, believing, alone in a crowd of doubters. His chest ached with the weight of it. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the sound of his father's voice, deep, steady, reassuring, the way it always made him feel safe even when the world felt too big. "Dad," he whispered softly, "please come soon. I'm tired of being the only one who believes." A car drove by, its headlights brushing over the sidewalk. Malik blinked and sat up straighter, his heart leaping, only to sink again when it wasn't his father. Just another stranger heading home. The loneliness deepened. He was surrounded by people, yet he felt invisible. To them, he was just a boy with a big story, and no proof. But inside, Malik carried something stronger than proof: faith. Still, faith doesn't stop the ache of waiting. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The officer checked his watch again, muttering under his breath. Malik didn't care. Time didn't matter to him. Only the moment his father appeared mattered. He thought about the last time he saw his dad. The airport was crowded, and Malik had clung to his father's uniform, not wanting to let go. "Promise you'll come back," he had said, tears in his eyes. And his father had knelt down, placed a strong hand on his shoulder, and said, "I promise, champ, no matter what." That memory kept Malik sitting on that curb, even when the loneliness grew sharp, even when the doubt whispered louder. The streetlight above flickered on, casting a soft glow around him. Malik's face looked small under the light, his eyes tired but still watchful. His hands clutched the letter tightly, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of hope. Officer Bradley looked at the boy again, and for the first time he felt something other than doubt. He felt a small tug of respect. The kid wasn't giving up. Not even after being laughed at, not even after hours of waiting. But still, the officer couldn't bring himself to believe. He muttered quietly, almost to himself, "I hope you're right, kid. I really do." Malik didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the corner, his heart whispering the same prayer over and over. "Come home, Dad. Come home." The world around him moved on. Cars drove by, people went home, the sky darkened, but Malik stayed, alone, yet not broken, lonely, yet not without faith, because he knew something no one else believed. His father was coming. The street had grown quieter as evening settled in. The warm colors of the sunset had faded into the darker shades of twilight. A soft hum of crickets filled the spaces between passing cars, and the streetlights now glowed steadily, painting the sidewalk in pale yellow. Malik sat on the curb, his backpack against his legs, his eyes still locked on the corner of the street. He had been waiting for what felt like forever, but he refused to move. His heart told him to stay. His father would come. Officer Bradley stood nearby, arms crossed, shifting from one foot to the other. He had stopped teasing the boy a while ago. Something about Malik's determination had silenced the laughter. Still, doubt lingered in his eyes. He glanced at the boy, then at the empty street, and sighed. "Kid," he said finally, "it's getting late. Maybe you should head home. Your dad might not—" Before he could finish, Malik sat up straighter, his eyes wide. "Wait," the boy whispered, his voice trembling with sudden excitement. From down the street, a tall figure appeared, walking, with steady steps. The sound of boots echoed faintly on the pavement, strong and sure. The man carried a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His posture was firm, his shoulders broad, and even in the dim light, his presence seemed commanding. "Malik's Heart leapt. He knew that walk anywhere. "Dad!" Malik shouted, springing to his feet. His voice cracked with pure joy as he ran toward the figure. The man stopped, dropped the bag to the ground, and knelt just in time to catch the boy in his arms. Malik threw himself against his father's chest, holding on as tightly as he could. Tears filled his eyes, but they were tears of relief, of joy, of love. Sergeant Daniels wrapped his arms around his son, pulling him close. His uniform jacket smelled faintly of dust and travel, but to Malik it was the safest, most familiar scent in the world. He pressed his face into his father's shoulder, not wanting to let go. "I missed you so much," Malik whispered, his voice muffled. "I missed you too, champ," his father said softly, his deep voice steady and warm. "I told you I'd come back." Officer Bradley stood frozen by his car, his mouth slightly open. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. The boy hadn't been lying. The boy hadn't been imagining. His father was real. Every word Malik had spoken was true. Sergeant Daniels rose to his feet, still holding Malik in his arms. The crowd that had once passed by without caring now slowed to watch. A few people stopped entirely, their eyes widening, as they noticed the man's uniform and the patches sewn on his bag. Malik pulled back slightly, his small hands still gripping his father's jacket. "I told them, Dad," he said proudly. "I told them you were special forces." His father smiled down at him, brushing a hand gently over his son's hair. "And you were right. You never stopped believing, did you?" "No," Malik said, shaking his head. "Not even when they laughed." The words made Bradley flinch. He remembered his own chuckle, the way he had dismissed the boy's hope. Now, standing face to face with the truth, he felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. "Sergeant," Daniels finally looked up, his eyes meeting the officer's. His expression wasn't angry, but it carried weight, calm authority mixed with quiet disappointment. He adjusted Malik in his arms and walked closer. "This your boy?" Bradley asked awkwardly, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," Daniels said firmly, "my son." He glanced at Malik and then back at the officer. "And he doesn't lie." Bradley shifted uncomfortably, his throat dry. He had spent hours doubting the boy, mocking the idea that someone like Daniels could exist here. Now, standing before him, he saw the truth in every line of the man's face, in the discipline of his posture, in the pride shining in his son's eyes. I didn't mean," Bradley started, but the words stuck. Daniels didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm tone carried more weight than shouting ever could. Children believe in their parents, that faith should be respected, not mocked. Bradley lowered his gaze, shame burning in his chest. "You're right," he admitted quietly. Malik looked up at his dad, pride swelling in his heart. He had waited, he had believed, and now the world could see the truth. His father was home. The duffel bag sat forgotten on the sidewalk, the patches, on it, visible to anyone passing by. They spoke silently of years of service, of missions never told in detail, of sacrifices unseen. But Malik didn't care about the medals or the patches. All he cared about was that his father was here, holding him, keeping his promise. "Ready to go home, champ?" Daniels asked gently. Malik nodded eagerly, his smile wide. "Can we get ice cream? Like you wrote in the letter?" Daniels chuckled, his eyes softening. "Of course. Ice cream first, home after." Together, father and son began to walk down the sidewalk. Malik clung to his father's hand, his small steps quick to keep up with the strong strides beside him. The crowd slowly dispersed, some whispering in awe, others simply watching with quiet respect. Officer Bradley remained by his car, still staring. His chest felt heavy, not just with shame, but also with admiration. He had misjudged a boy and, in doing so, had almost missed the chance to witness something rare and beautiful, a promise kept, a faith rewarded, a family reunited. As Malik and his father disappeared into the distance, Bradley let out a slow breath. He knew he would remember this moment for a long time, the day a boy's hope proved stronger than doubt, and the truth walked onto the scene with steady, undeniable steps. The night air felt cooler now, brushing gently against Malik's face as he held his father's hand tightly. Every step beside Sergeant Daniels felt like a dream come true. The boy's heart was light, and his smile didn't fade even for a moment. Behind them, Officer Bradley still stood near his patrol car, watching. He had told himself he would drive away, but his feet didn't move. Something about the scene had rooted him to the ground. The boy's faith, the father's quiet strength, it was something he couldn't shake. Finally, Daniels slowed his steps and turned back toward the officer. Malik looked up at his father, confused, but followed as he walked closer. Bradley straightened, trying to appear calm, but the weight of guilt pressed down on him. He remembered every laugh, every dismissive word he had said to Malik. Now, standing face to face with the truth, he felt smaller than ever. Daniel's eyes met his, steady and calm. He didn't glare, and he didn't raise his voice. But his silence spoke louder than anger. "Officer," Daniels said evenly, "I appreciate you looking out for my son while he was waiting, but I also heard enough to know you doubted him." Bradley cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. Yeah, I did. I thought he was just making it up. Kids sometimes, well, you know, they tell stories." Daniels nodded slowly. "They do, but faith in a parent is not a story. It's something sacred. A child's trust is the strongest thing he can give. And once broken, it's hard to fix." Malik squeezed his father's hand, looking up at him with admiration. He didn't understand every word, but he knew his father was standing up for him. Bradley looked at Malik, then back at Daniels. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I laughed. I shouldn't have. I didn't realize—" He stopped, searching for the words. "I didn't realize he was telling the truth." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Sometimes truth doesn't look the way we expect. That's why we should be careful with our words, especially around children." The officer nodded, shame burning in his chest. "I see that now, and I owe him an apology." He crouched down, a little meeting Malik's eyes. The boy blinked, surprised to see the once smug officer looking so serious. "Hey, Malik," Bradley said gently. "I'm sorry for laughing at you. I shouldn't have doubted you. You were right to believe in your dad." Malik studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "It's okay," he said softly. "I knew he'd come." The simplicity of the words struck Bradley harder than any scolding could have. The boy hadn't needed to prove anything. He had just believed, and that belief had been enough. Daniels placed a hand on his son's shoulder and looked back at the officer. "Apology accepted," he said calmly. "But remember this, kids don't need us to doubt them. They need us to support their hope, even when it sounds impossible." Bradley swallowed hard. He had spent years on the force thinking he understood people, but today, a boy had shown him something he had overlooked, the power of faith and the quiet strength of waiting with hope. The silence stretched for a moment. Malik leaned closer to his father, resting his head against his arm. Daniels smiled softly and ruffled his son's hair. "Come on, champ," Daniels said. "Let's get that ice cream." Malik's eyes lit up again. "Yes, ice cream!" The boy's laughter rang out, light and joyful, as the tension slowly lifted. Daniels picked up his duffel bag, and together, father and son began walking again. But before leaving, Daniels turned one last time to Bradley. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had seen much but still valued kindness above all. "Officer," he said. "Every child deserves the chance to be believed in. Don't forget that." Bradley nodded, his throat tight. "I won't," he said sincerely. As father and son walked away, Bradley stood in the glow of the streetlight, replaying the moment in his mind. He realized something important. Strength wasn't always shown through uniforms, badges, or authority. Sometimes it was shown through a child's unshakable faith and a father's steady promise. The shift had happened quietly but powerfully. The boy was no longer the one being doubted. Now it was Bradley who doubted himself. Malik skipped a little as he walked, swinging his father's hand. "Dad," he said with a grin, "did you hear?" He said sorry. Daniels chuckled softly. "Yes, I heard, and you handled it well. You forgave him. That takes real strength." Malik looked up proudly. "Just like you taught me?" "Exactly," Daniels said, smiling down at his son. "Exactly like that." The night around them seemed brighter somehow. Malik's loneliness had vanished, replaced with the comfort of his father's presence. The doubt of strangers no longer mattered. What mattered was that his father had come, just like he said he would, and for Bradley, still standing in silence, the lesson was clear. Doubt might come easily, but respect and belief mattered more. The ice cream shop was just a short walk from the corner store. Its windows glowed warmly against the night, and the sweet smell of vanilla drifted into the cool air each time the door opened. Inside, families sat at tables, laughing, sharing sundaes, and enjoying the simple happiness of the evening. Malik pressed his face to the glass before pushing the door open with both hands. The bell above the door jingled, and he ran straight to the counter, his excitement impossible to hide. Sergeant Daniels followed behind, his heavy duffel bag slung casually over one shoulder. His eyes softened at the sight of his son's joy. "Chocolate or strawberry, champ?" Daniels asked, setting the bag down. "Both," Malik answered quickly, his grin wide. Daniels chuckled and placed the order. As the worker behind the counter scooped the ice cream, Malik glanced at the door and noticed Officer Bradley step inside. The boy blinked in surprise. The officer had followed them. Bradley hesitated near the entrance, unsure whether to stay or leave, but finally he walked over and cleared his throat. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Daniels gave a small nod. "Go ahead." The officer sat down at the table across from them, removing his hat and holding it in his hands. Malik studied him curiously but said nothing. He was too busy enjoying the thought of the ice cream he was about to eat. When the bowls arrived, Malik dug in happily, his spoon clinking against the glass dish. Daniels, however, kept his eyes on Bradley. There was something unfinished in the officer's face, something that told him the man needed more than just forgiveness. He needed understanding. "You've been quiet," Daniels said calmly. "Something on your mind?" Bradley looked down at the hat in his hands. "I've been on this job for 15 years. I thought I'd seen enough to know when a story wasn't real, when a kid was exaggerating. But tonight..." He shook his head slowly. "Tonight I realized I might have been wrong more times than..." "I know." Daniels leaned back, his expression steady. "It's easy to doubt. Doubt feels safe. But faith, that takes courage, especially for a child." Bradley sighed. "I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought I was just teasing. But seeing the way he held on, and then watching you walk down that street..." His voice trailed off, heavy with regret. Malik licked his spoon, listening now. His eyes flicked between the two men, trying to understand. Daniels placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You know, officer, children don't measure their parents by medals or titles. They measure them by promises kept. Malik didn't care about the words special forces. He cared about me coming home when I said I would." Malik nodded quickly. "I knew you would, Dad. I told everyone." Bradley smiled faintly at the boy's pride, but his eyes held sadness. "I should have believed you." Or at least respected your words. I forgot what it means to have that kind of trust. Daniels leaned forward slightly. That's the lesson, officer. Respect. You don't have to know the truth of every detail. You don't have to see the proof. But when a child speaks with that much hope, the least we can do is honor it. Bradley swallowed, the words settling deep. He thought about his own childhood, about times he had spoken proudly of his father only to be laughed at by adults who didn't believe him. He had forgotten that sting until tonight. I see it now, he admitted quietly. It's not about whether I believed his story. It's about whether I respected his faith. And I didn't. Daniels gave a slow nod. Then learn from it. We've all made mistakes. What matters is whether we choose to change. Malik pushed his empty bowl aside, his face still glowing with happiness. Dad, can I tell him the promise you wrote in the letter? Daniels smiled. Go ahead, champ. Malik turned to Bradley, his small voice filled with confidence. Dad wrote that when nobody believes me, I should remember that he always does. That's why I wasn't scared when you laughed, because he believes me, even from far away. Two words struck Bradley harder than anything else. He felt his throat tighten, his eyes stinging slightly. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Finally, he cleared his throat. That's a powerful promise, Malik. And your dad's right. You held onto it better than most grown-ups ever could. The boy beamed, proud of himself. Daniel stood, picking up his duffel bag again. We should be going. It's been a long journey, and my son deserves a good night's sleep in his own bed. Bradley rose as well, placing his hat back on his head. He extended his hand awkwardly. Sergeant, thank you for the lesson. Daniel shook his hand firmly. Take it with you, officer. Every child out there has a story. Don't dismiss it so quickly. Bradley nodded, his face serious. I won't. I promise. As Daniels and Malik walked out of the shop together, the bell above the door jingled once more. The cool night air greeted them, and Malik clung tightly to his father's arm, happier than he had been in months. Bradley remained inside for a while longer, sitting back down at the empty table. His ice cream melted untouched in front of him. He thought about the boy, about the father's calm wisdom, and about the lesson that had unfolded right before his eyes. He had come that evening as a man who laughed at a child's hope. But he would leave as someone changed, humbled, and reminded of something he had forgotten. That sometimes the strongest truths come from the smallest voices. The night sky stretched quietly above the small town, filled with stars that blinked like watchful eyes. Malik walked beside his father, holding tightly to his hand as though he feared letting go would make him disappear again. Sergeant Daniels carried his duffel bag on the other side, his steps steady, each one filled with the calm strength of a man who had seen much but never stopped cherishing what truly mattered. The street lamps cast a soft glow on the sidewalk, and Malik looked up, his eyes bright. Dad, do you think Officer Bradley really learned his lesson? Daniels smiled faintly. I think he did. Some lessons are harder to learn, but when they touch your heart, you don't forget them. Malik thought about it for a moment. He looked sorry, like he wanted to be better. Daniels nodded. That's what matters, son. We all make mistakes. What shows our character is how we change after them. They continued down the street, passing quiet homes with warm lights in the windows. Malik's heart swelled. For so many nights, he had fallen asleep imagining this very moment. Walking home with his dad at his side, feeling safe, knowing the promise was real. Now it wasn't just a dream, it was happening. When they reached their house, the porch light was glowing, just as Daniels had left it months ago. He paused for a moment, staring at the familiar front door. Homecoming always carried a certain weight, a mix of relief, gratitude, and a quiet ache for the time that had been lost. Malik, however, didn't wait. He darted forward and threw the door open. "We're home!" he shouted joyfully, his voice ringing through the empty house. Daniel stepped inside behind him, setting down his bag with a deep breath. The air smelled faintly of wood and old books. Everything was just as he remembered. For a moment he closed his eyes, allowing himself to feel the comfort of ordinary life again. Malik ran from room to room, pointing out little things that hadn't changed. "See, Dad? Your chair is still in the corner. And your boots, I kept them clean. And look, the photo on the wall. I dusted it every week so it wouldn't get dirty." Daniels followed slowly, his heart swelling with pride. "You did all that, champ? For me?" Malik nodded firmly. "I wanted everything to be ready when you came back, just like I promised." The words struck Daniels deeply. Kneeling down, he pulled his son into a tight hug. "You're stronger than you know, Malik. Stronger than most adults. You kept hope alive. That's not easy." Malik hugged him back with all his strength. "I never stopped believing. Even when people laughed." Daniels pulled back enough to look his son in the eyes. "That's what makes you special. You didn't let their doubt take your faith away." The boy smiled shyly, proud of himself. Later, as Malik settled into bed, Daniels tucked him in like he used to. The boy's eyelids grew heavy, but his voice was still curious. "Dad, will you have to leave again?" Daniels hesitated, brushing his son's hair gently. "Maybe someday. That's part of my duty. But no matter where I go, my heart stays here, with you." Malik yawned and whispered, "I'll remember." Then he drifted into sleep, his small hand still clutching his father's fingers until it finally relaxed. Daniels sat beside him for a while, listening to the steady breathing of his child. A deep peace settled over him. Missions came and went, but moments like this, quiet, ordinary love, were the true victories. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Daniels brewed coffee in the kitchen when he heard a knock at the door. Opening it, he found Officer Bradley standing, there hat in hand. "Good morning, Sergeant," Bradley said respectfully. Daniels studied him quietly before stepping aside. "Come in." Bradley entered, his posture more humble than the night before. "I just wanted to say thank you again, and to tell you I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about respect." Daniels poured a second cup of coffee and handed it to him. "Sit down, officer." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Bradley took a breath. "I realized last night that I've been carrying doubt like a shield. It made me quick to dismiss people, especially kids. Maybe because I didn't want to be wrong. But Malik showed me that being wrong isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is not believing when someone needs you to." Daniels nodded slowly. "That's an important truth, and it seems you've taken it to heart." Bradley looked up, his voice steady. "I have. I want to do better. Not just for Malik, but for every kid I meet. I don't want to be the man who laughs at hope. I want to be the one who protects it." Daniels studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Then start today." Bradley shook his hand firmly. In that simple gesture, something shifted. A quiet understanding, a promise without words. Just then, Malik wandered sleepily into the room, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Bradley, he froze for a second, but instead of fear or hurt, his small voice simply said, "Good morning." Bradley's chest tightened. He managed a gentle smile. "Good morning, Malik. You were right. About everything." The boy tilted his head. "I know," he said softly, then crawled into his father's lap. Daniels chuckled, wrapping his arms around him. Bradley stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll let you two enjoy your time. But thank you. Both of you." As he left the house, The sun was climbing higher, bathing the street in golden light. Bradley walked away slowly, his steps lighter than the night before. He carried no laughter now, only reflection and a new sense of duty. Inside, Daniels watched him through the window. Malik snuggled against his chest, whispering, "Dad, he's different now." "Yes, champ," Daniels replied. "Sometimes one moment can change a person forever." Malik smiled, closing his eyes again. For the first time in a long while, he felt the world was safe. His father was home, his promise had been kept, and even hearts that once doubted could learn to believe. And with that, the story found its quiet end, not with loud applause or grand speeches, but with a simple walk away, carrying the kind of lesson that stays long after the night has passed.